The radio waves had been traveling for 300 years when they finally reached human space. Lieutenant Commander Alex Kane almost missed them entirely, buried as they were beneath the usual cosmic background radiation that filled the deep space monitoring arrays. Only the strange mathematical patterns embedded within the signal caught his attention during his routine sweep of the outer rim frequencies. Alex leaned forward in his chair, adjusting the translation protocols for the 5th time in an hour. The patterns were definitely artificial, but unlike anything in the human databases. The signal originated from a sector of space humanity had never explored, nearly 8,000 light-years from Earth's outermost colonies. What made his hands shake slightly as he worked was the tone of desperation that came through even the most basic translation attempts. The breakthrough came when the quantum linguistics computer finally found a pattern match. The message wasn't using words as humans understood them, but mathematical concepts that conveyed meaning through pure logic. As the translation scrolled across his screen, Alex felt his blood run cold. To any who receive this transmission, we are the last of the Covenant of Silence. Our 17 worlds burn. Our fleets are broken. The Devourers consume everything we were, everything we hoped to be. If you possess the wisdom to receive this message, then perhaps you also possess the strength we lack. We have heard whispers of a young species that refuses to yield, that fights with fury unknown to civilized worlds. We do not call to you as equals, for we have proven ourselves unworthy of survival. We call to you as the drowning call to any hand that might pull them from the depths. Alex stared at the message for several minutes, reading it again and again. 17 species, all of them dying. An enemy that consumed worlds, and somehow, somewhere, these aliens had heard of humanity. The implications hit him like a physical blow. Humanity wasn't alone in the galaxy, and apparently they'd already developed a reputation. He forwarded the message up the chain of command immediately, but protocols demanded he continue monitoring the frequency. What came next made the original transmission look like casual conversation. Data streams poured through the quantum channels containing star charts, tactical analyses, and what appeared to be the complete military history of a war that had lasted 3 centuries. The enemy was called the Devourers, and they weren't alive in any sense humans understood the word. They were machines, but not like human artificial intelligence. These things existed solely to consume, to convert matter and energy into more copies of themselves. They'd started in the galactic core and worked their way outward, leaving nothing but empty space and processed materials in their wake. Captain Roy Bennett arrived at the monitoring station 6 hours later, having made the journey from the nearest fleet base in record time. Alex had never seen the veteran officer look shaken before, but the complete intelligence package had that effect on most people who read it. The scale of destruction was almost incomprehensible. Entire star systems simply gone, converted into raw materials for the Devourer fleet. "How long until they reach human space?" Bennett asked, though Alex suspected he already knew the answer. "At their current rate of expansion, 50 years. Maybe less if they don't encounter significant resistance." Alex pulled up a tactical display showing the Devourer advance. Red markers indicated consumed systems, while flickering yellow dots showed the last known positions of Covenant survivors. "Sir, they're not just killing these species. They're erasing them completely. No survivors, no ruins, nothing left behind." Bennett nodded grimly. "And the aliens who sent this message?" "Still transmitting, but the signal strength is dropping. Their source is moving, probably fleeing from whatever's left of their territory." Alex highlighted a section of the translation. "They mention a final gathering point, somewhere they call the Shattered Reach. Coordinates are included, but it's 18 months travel time at maximum jump speed." The next transmission came through 3 days later, and this time it wasn't a desperate plea for help. It was first contact. Ambassador Quinn of the Tala species appeared on the quantum communication array as a shimmering crystalline figure, speaking through what must have been their last functioning deep space relay. The conversation was stilted at first, hampered by translation delays and the sheer strangeness of talking to an alien intelligence. But Quinn's desperation overcame protocol quickly. The Tala were one of the founding members of the Covenant of Silence, a loose federation that had governed the local galactic arm for over 2,000 years. They'd been explorers, scientists, philosophers. Now they were refugees hiding in the wreckage of their own civilization. "Your species interests us greatly," Quinn said, the translation matrix struggling with concepts that had no human equivalent. "We have monitored your expansion for several of your centuries. You fight in ways we do not understand, with intensity that frightens even us. When faced with extinction, most species either surrender or despair. Humanity seems to become more dangerous." Bennett chose his words carefully. "We don't like bullies, and we really don't like losing friends." The crystal being's form flickered as the signal weakened. "We are not your friends, human Bennett. We are strangers asking you to die for us. But if the whispers are true, if your kind truly refuses to yield when cornered, then perhaps there is hope yet." What followed was 18 hours of continuous data exchange. The Covenant shared everything they knew about the Devourers, their tactics, their weaknesses, their horrifying efficiency. Humanity's response was characteristically direct. Bennett sent a single message back to Earth. "Xenocide in progress. Request immediate mobilization of all available assets." The United Earth Federation's response broke every precedent in human history. Emergency sessions convened on every major world. Colonial militias were federalized overnight. Industrial complexes that had been producing civilian goods were retooled for military production. Within 72 hours, humanity had made its decision. They weren't just going to send help. They were going to send everything. Admiral Grace Stone received her orders while reviewing fleet dispositions from the orbital command station above Mars. The message was brief and carried the authorization codes of the Federation President, the Colonial Senate, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She read it twice, then called up her senior staff. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to war with an enemy we've never seen, in defense of aliens we've never met, in a sector of space we've never explored." She paused, looking at each face around the conference table. "Any questions? Commander?" Beth Park spoke first. "What do we call this operation, Admiral?" Stone smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. "The Endgame fleet, because if we lose this one, there won't be another game to play." The mobilization began immediately. Shipyards that had been operating at peacetime capacity suddenly ran triple shifts. Civilian vessels were requisitioned and refitted with military hardware. The call went out to every human colony, every military base, every merchant fleet. Humanity was going to answer the aliens' plea for help, but they were going to answer it in the most human way possible. They were going to bring overwhelming force and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. The Devourers had consumed 17 civilizations over 3 centuries. They were about to learn why humanity had developed such an interesting reputation among the survivors. The construction yards around Jupiter had never seen anything like it. Massive frameworks that usually built one capital ship every 2 years now assembled entire battle groups in a matter of weeks. Admiral Grace Stone walked through the central observation deck of Titan Base, watching as humanity's greatest military achievement took shape in the space around her. The Endgame fleet defied every conventional understanding of naval warfare. Where other species built ships according to rigid classifications and standardized designs, humanity had created something entirely different. Each vessel was modular, adaptable, designed to be reconfigured for different missions without returning to port. Dreadnoughts could split into smaller cruiser formations. Fighters could link together to form temporary capital ships. Nothing stayed the same long enough for an enemy to develop effective countermeasures. Dr. Emma Cole, the Federation's leading expert on adaptive technology, joined Stone at the observation window. "The aliens are going to have some interesting Reactions to this, she said, gesturing toward a kilometer-long vessel that was currently separating into 6 independent sections. Their military doctrine assumes ships have fixed roles and capabilities. Our entire fleet is built around the concept that assumptions get you killed. Stone nodded, watching as human crews worked alongside their AI partners to coordinate the largest military mobilization in their species' history. That partnership was perhaps humanity's greatest advantage, though it was one the Covenant survivors found deeply disturbing. Where other species either enslaved artificial intelligence or feared it, humans had done something unprecedented. They'd made it a member of the family. Every ship in the Endgame fleet carried an AI core, but these weren't servants or masters. They were partners, each one paired with human commanders in a symbiotic relationship that amplified the strengths of both organic and artificial intelligence. The AIs provided instant tactical analysis and coordination across impossible distances. The humans provided creativity, intuition, and the kind of inspired madness that no programming could replicate. Commander Neil Foster's ship, the UEF Relentless, demonstrated this partnership perfectly. His AI companion, which called itself Bishop, could process enemy movement patterns and calculate optimal responses in microseconds. But when Foster decided to ram an asteroid into an enemy formation while using it as cover for a stealth attack, Bishop didn't argue with the insanity. It simply calculated how to make the insanity work. The fleet's weaponry followed the same philosophy of adaptive chaos. Human ships didn't carry standardized armaments. Instead, they carried fabrication systems that could produce whatever weapons the situation required. Plasma cannons, railguns, gravity projectors, even exotic matter warheads that bent space-time itself. If a weapon could be theoretically constructed, human ships could build it in the middle of a battle. But the most unsettling aspect of humanity's military doctrine, from the aliens' perspective, was their attitude towards sacrifice. Every ship in the Endgame fleet was equipped with the Prometheus Protocol, a system that could convert the vessel's entire mass into pure energy in a matter of seconds. It was a weapon of last resort that could destroy entire fleets, but it required the voluntary death of everyone aboard. Other species viewed such weapons as barbaric, too terrible to contemplate. Humans called them Tuesday. Every crew member who volunteered for the Endgame fleet signed forms acknowledging they might be called upon to die not just fighting the enemy, but as the weapon that killed the enemy. The waiting lists for those positions stretched around multiple worlds. Ambassador Quinn of the Tala observed the fleet construction through quantum communication links, and the crystalline being's growing confusion was evident even through the translation barriers. "We do not understand your methods, Admiral Stone. You build ships that change their purpose. You create weapons that destroy their users. You partner with artificial minds that could rebel against you. How do you maintain order among such chaos?" Stone's response became part of human military legend. "Order is overrated. Chaos confuses the enemy, and our AIs don't rebel because we don't give them anything to rebel against. They're not our servants or our masters. They're our friends. And friends don't betray each other." The tactical doctrine that emerged from human-AI collaboration was something entirely new to galactic warfare. Traditional fleet engagements followed. Predictable patterns. Formations approached each other, exchanged fire at maximum range, and the side with superior numbers or technology usually won. Human tactics threw all of that out the airlock. Captain Beth Park's battle group specialized in what they called probability warfare. They would simultaneously execute dozens of different attack patterns, forcing the enemy to defend against all of them without knowing which ones were real. Her flagship could appear to be leading a frontal assault while actually preparing to strike from behind enemy lines. The AI systems coordinated these deceptions across hundreds of vessels, creating phantom fleets that existed only in enemy sensors. Commander David Liu took a different approach with his stealth squadrons. His ships could disappear entirely from conventional detection, using technology that bent light and gravity around their hulls. But rather than simply hiding, Liu's forces used their invisibility to study enemy behavior patterns. They would observe for days or weeks, learning how their opponents thought and reacted, then strike with surgical precision at exactly the right moment to cause maximum psychological damage. The industrial might behind the fleet was equally impressive. Humanity had turned their entire civilization into a weapon factory. Civilian corporations competed to design more effective military hardware. Scientists who had been researching peaceful applications of exotic matter suddenly found themselves developing planet-killing weapons. Children in schools held fund drives to buy armor plating for the ships that would carry their older siblings into battle. The speed of human mobilization shocked even their own leaders. Admiral Stone had requested a fleet of 10,000 vessels and expected to receive maybe half that number within a year. Instead, she found herself commanding 40,000 ships with more arriving daily. Entire colonial militias had volunteered to join the expedition. Merchant fleets had converted their cargo holds into weapons bays. Even exploration vessels had been refitted with military-grade shields and sensors. But perhaps the most distinctly human aspect of the Endgame fleet was its diversity. While other species maintained strict hierarchies and standardized equipment, human forces embraced controlled chaos. No two battle groups used exactly the same tactics. Ship designs varied wildly between different construction yards. Commanders were encouraged to experiment with new approaches and share successful innovations across the fleet. This diversity extended to the crews as well. The Endgame fleet included veterans of humanity's colonial wars, fresh recruits from the outer systems, scientists, engineers, diplomats, and even a small number of journalists whose job was to document whatever they found in alien space. The entire expedition was unmistakably human in its refusal to conform to anyone's expectations. Ambassador Quinn watched the final preparations with something approaching awe. Your fleet does not resemble any military force in Covenant records. It appears to be equal parts warrior band and scientific expedition, with weapons that defy conventional understanding and crews that seem eager for battle. Are all human military forces so chaotic? Admiral Stone smiled. This isn't chaos, Ambassador. This is jazz. Everyone knows the basic tune, but we're all improvising our own parts. The result might not be pretty, but it'll definitely be loud. And it'll definitely be something your devourers have never heard before. The departure ceremony was held on Earth, broadcast across every human world and colony. President Williams spoke of humanity's obligation to defend the innocent, regardless of species or distance. The Federation Senate passed a resolution declaring the Devourer War to be humanity's war, with all the resources that implied. But the moment that defined humanity's commitment came when a young reporter asked Admiral Stone what would happen if the Endgame fleet wasn't strong enough to stop the Devourers. Stone's answer became the fleet's unofficial motto. Then we'll build a bigger fleet, and if that's not enough, we'll build an even bigger one. We'll keep building and fighting until either they're gone or we are. Because that's what humans do when someone threatens our friends. Space around the shattered reach looked like a graveyard of titans. The broken remains of 3 star systems drifted in impossible formations, held together by artificial gravity generators that the Covenant survivors had constructed from the wreckage of their own civilization. Habitats carved from asteroid fragments housed the last 2 million souls of 17 different species, all of them waiting to die. The arrival of the Endgame fleet changed everything about that grim equation. 40,000 human vessels dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with fresh armor and their weapons arrays fully charged. The contrast was stark and immediate. Where the alien survivors huddled in makeshift shelters, humanity deployed like a precision instrument designed for one purpose: war. Ambassador Quinn met with Admiral Stone aboard the flagship Indomitable, and the crystalline being's relief was visible even through the translation barriers. "We had hoped, but we did not dare to believe," Quinn said. Your fleet is larger than the combined naval forces of 3 Covenant worlds at their peak. Perhaps there is truly reason for hope." Stone's response was characteristically direct. "Hope is good. Preparation is better. Show us everything you know about these devourers. Tactics, technology, behavioral patterns. We're going to need every advantage we can get." What the humans learned in the following days changed their entire understanding of the threat they faced. The devourers weren't just machines. They were a form of artificial intelligence that had evolved beyond any organic comprehension. They existed as a hive mind spanning thousands of light years, with individual units that could think and adapt independently while remaining connected to the collective consciousness. Their ships were grown rather than built, using nanotechnology that could convert any matter into hull plating, weapons, or propulsion systems. A devourer fleet could strip mine an entire planet in hours and emerge with twice as many vessels as they'd started with. They'd perfected this process over millennia, consuming civilizations not just for resources but for the knowledge contained in their cultures and technologies. Dr. Cole found the technical specifications particularly disturbing. "They don't just copy what they find," she explained during a briefing with the fleet's senior commanders. "They improve it. Every species they've encountered has made them stronger. They'll analyze our weapons, our tactics, our technology, and within hours they'll have developed counters for all of it." Commander Neil Foster leaned back in his chair, considering the implications. "So we can't rely on superior technology or conventional tactics. They'll adapt to anything we throw at them if we give them enough time." "Which means we don't give them time," Admiral Stone said. "We hit them fast, hard, and with things they've never seen before. And then, before they can adapt, we hit them with something completely different." The opportunity to test this theory came sooner than anyone expected. Long-range sensors detected a devourer scouting force approaching the shattered reach. 3,000 vessels of various sizes, moving in the precise geometric formations that characterized their species. It was a relatively small force by their standards, probably sent to investigate the unusual energy signatures from the Covenant survivors' gravity generators. Commander Beth Park's battle group moved to intercept, taking position along the devourers' projected path. Her flagship, the UEF Prometheus, led a formation of 200 vessels that looked nothing like traditional fleet deployments. Some ships moved in tight clusters, others spread across thousands of kilometers. A few had apparently broken formation entirely and were drifting like debris. The devourers approached with mechanical confidence, their sensors analyzing the human formation and finding it tactically unsound by every measure in their databases. Individual vessels appeared to be out of position, weapon systems seemed inadequately coordinated, and the overall deployment suggested either incompetence or desperation. The machine intelligence calculated a 97% probability of complete victory. They were wrong. Park's opening move would have been impossible for any other species to coordinate. 300 ships that had appeared to be scattered randomly suddenly revealed themselves as a single tactical unit. The debris were actually stealth vessels that had been positioned weeks in advance. The out-of-position ships were exactly where they needed to be to create overlapping fields of fire that turned the devourer's approach vector into a killing ground. But the real surprise came from humanity's choice of weapons. Instead of the energy cannons or missile systems the devourers expected, human ships opened fire with solid projectiles accelerated to near-light speeds, rails guns, mass drivers, and kinetic weapons that had no electronic signatures for the enemy to jam or deflect. The devourers' adaptive shields, designed to counter energy weapons, were useless against chunks of tungsten traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. The machine intelligence tried to adapt, but Park was already 3 steps ahead. As the devourers adjusted their formations to minimize kinetic damage, human ships switched to gravity weapons that created localized distortions in space-time itself. When the enemy responded to that threat, the humans deployed something completely unprecedented: Weaponized asteroids guided by AI pilots willing to die for the chance to ram enemy vessels. Foster's squadron demonstrated another uniquely human approach to combat. His ships didn't try to outfight the Devourers in traditional engagements. Instead, they studied their enemies' behavioral patterns in real time, using advanced AI analysis to predict how individual Devourer vessels would react to specific threats. Then they created exactly those threats in precisely the right sequence to make the enemy ships destroy each other. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Devourer scouting force. Not a single machine vessel survived, while human losses were minimal. But the victory came with a sobering realization that chilled even veteran commanders. The Devourers had adapted to some human weapons during the fight itself. Energy signatures from destroyed enemy ships showed modifications to their shielding systems that would provide resistance to kinetic weapons in future engagements. The machine intelligence was learning from its defeats, incorporating human tactical innovations into its own combat doctrine. Dr. Cole's analysis of the wreckage confirmed humanity's worst fears. "They're not just studying our weapons," she reported. "They're reverse engineering our entire approach to warfare. Look at these modifications. They've already begun implementing modular hull designs based on what they observed from our ships." Admiral Stone gathered her senior commanders for an emergency briefing. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've won our first battle, but we've also educated our enemy. Every engagement from now on will be harder than the last. The Devourers will know what to expect from us." Commander Park disagreed. "Respectfully, Admiral, they'll know what to expect from what they've seen. But they haven't seen everything yet, and more importantly, they still don't understand how we think." She was right. The Devourers' analysis of human combat doctrine focused on weapons and tactics, the observable elements of warfare. What they missed entirely was the psychological component that drove human military thinking: the willingness to sacrifice, the refusal to surrender, the tendency to become more dangerous when cornered rather than more desperate. The Covenant survivors watched the battle's aftermath with a mixture of amazement and concern. Ambassador Quinn observed as human crews immediately began studying their own performance, identifying weaknesses and developing counters to the Devourers' adaptive responses. "Your species learns as quickly as they do," Quinn noted. "But they learn from victory. While you learn from both victory and defeat, this gives you advantages they cannot comprehend." The real test came when long-range sensors detected the Devourers' response to their scouting force's destruction. The machine intelligence was dispatching a much larger fleet to investigate. 50,000 vessels led by what appeared to be a regional command node, a moon-sized artificial intelligence that coordinated Devourer operations across multiple star systems. Admiral Stone looked at the sensor readings and smiled. "They're coming to us. That's good. It means we get to choose the battleground." She turned to her staff officers. "Signal the fleet. It's time to show these machines what happens when they threaten humanity's friends." The preparation for the main battle began immediately. Human ships spread throughout the shattered reach, using the debris fields and artificial gravity generators to create the most complex battlefield in galactic history. Stealth vessels positioned themselves along multiple approach vectors. Mobile weapons platforms disguised as asteroid fragments waited in predetermined positions. The entire system became a trap designed specifically to counter everything humanity had learned about Devourer tactics. But the most important preparation was psychological. Human crews knew they were about to face an enemy that had never lost, a major engagement, an intelligence that had consumed entire civilizations without suffering significant casualties. The odds were terrible, the stakes were absolute, and failure meant the extinction of billions of innocent beings. For any other species, such knowledge might have led to despair or desperate last stands. For humanity, it led to something else entirely. They started making jokes about it. Crew members began wagering on how long it would take to destroy the enemy command node. Engineers started designing new weapons systems specifically for the upcoming battle. Instead of despair, the knowledge that they faced impossible odds filled human crews with the kind of grim enthusiasm that their species was famous for. The TAS, Devourers, were about to learn that humanity's reputation among the galaxy's survivors wasn't based on superior technology or overwhelming numbers. It was based on something far more dangerous: the absolute refusal to accept defeat when defending others, combined with the creative intelligence to turn any disadvantage into a weapon. The Devourer main fleet arrived like a moving constellation of death. 800,000 vessels of every size and configuration dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the processed remains of civilizations they'd consumed across 3 centuries of conquest. At the center of this nightmare, Armada hung the primary node, a moon-sized intelligence that had orchestrated the extinction of countless species. Commander David Liu watched the enemy deployment from the bridge of his stealth ship Hidden Strike, positioned deep within an asteroid field where even advanced sensors couldn't detect him. The scope of the threat was beyond anything in human military experience. The largest battle in their history had involved maybe 10,000 ships total. This single Devourer fleet outnumbered the entire Endgame fleet by 20 to 1. "Well," Liu said to his AI partner Echo, "we always said we wanted a challenge." Echo's response came through the ship's speakers with what sounded almost like amusement. "I calculate our odds of survival at approximately 0.03%. However, my analysis may be flawed, as it assumes rational tactical deployment by our forces." Liu grinned. "That's where you're wrong, Echo. Rational went out the airlock the moment we decided to save a bunch of aliens we'd never met from machines that eat star systems. Now we get to be creative instead." Across the Shattered Reach, similar conversations were taking place on 40,000 human vessels. Crews looked at impossible odds and made jokes about them. Engineers examined weapons that had never been tested and promised they'd probably work. Commanders developed battle plans that violated every principle of conventional warfare and called them good enough. Admiral Stone's strategy would have been called insane by any military academy in human space. Instead of concentrating her forces for a decisive battle, she was doing the exact opposite. The Endgame fleet scattered across 17 star systems, breaking into thousands of individual units that moved independently. Some ships headed directly toward the Devourer fleet. Others moved away from it. A few seemed to be ignoring the enemy entirely. The primary node analyzed this deployment with growing confusion. Human forces appeared to have abandoned all tactical coordination. Individual vessels were taking positions that made no strategic sense. Several large formations seemed to be retreating before any shots had been fired. The machine intelligence calculated that humanity had either lost their collective mind or was attempting to implement some form of combat doctrine that existed outside its considerable database. Both assessments were correct. The battle began. When Foster's squadron engaged the Devourer advance guard near the outer planets of the Shattered Reach system, his ships used the same kinetic weapons that had proven effective in the previous engagement, but this time the Devourers were ready. Adaptive shields deflected most projectiles, while return fire from energy weapons designed specifically to counter human tactics began taking its toll. Foster's response demonstrated why humanity had developed such an interesting reputation. Instead of withdrawing when his initial attack failed, he ordered his ships to ram the enemy vessels. Not as a desperate last resort, but as a carefully planned tactic. Human ships were designed with reinforced hulls and modular construction that allowed them to survive collision impacts that would destroy conventional vessels. The sight of human ships deliberately ramming Devourer vessels while their crews cheered over open communication channels had a profound effect on both sides of the conflict. The machine intelligence struggled to develop tactical responses to opponents who treated their own destruction as just another weapon. The Covenant survivors, listening to human battle communications, began to understand why these strange aliens had volunteered to die for strangers. But ramming attacks were just the opening move. As Devourer forces moved to counter this new threat, Park's battle group struck from an entirely different direction, using weapons that shouldn't have existed. Her ships fired modified mining charges that created localized black holes, space-time, distortions that consumed everything within their event horizons. When the Devourers adapted to gravitational weapons, human forces switched to something completely unprecedented. They started using the enemy's own technology against them. Dr. Cole had spent weeks analyzing Devourer wreckage from the previous battle, not to understand how their technology worked, but to find ways to make it work against them. Her breakthrough came when she realized that Devourer ships communicated through quantum entanglement networks that could be disrupted with precisely calibrated interference patterns. Human ships began broadcasting signals that caused individual Devourer vessels to lose connection with the hive mind. Cut off from the collective intelligence, these ships became confused, erratic, sometimes even attacking their own forces. The machine intelligence tried to counter this electronic warfare, but humanity had advantages that no algorithm could predict. Human creativity didn't follow logical patterns. Where the Devourers expected systematic approaches to problems, humans improvised solutions that made no sense until they worked. Crew members jury-rigged weapons systems while under fire, combining technologies that had never been designed to work together. AI partners provided computational support for ideas that violated known physics, but somehow functioned anyway. The turning point came when Liu's stealth squadrons penetrated deep into the Devourer formation, close enough to launch direct attacks on the primary node itself. The moon-sized intelligence had never faced a direct assault in its millennia of existence, protected as it was by hundreds of thousands of Guardian vessels. But Liu's forces weren't trying to fight their way through the Devourer fleet. They were using the enemy's own size against them. Human ships, small enough to be mistaken for debris, had infiltrated the formation over several days, positioning themselves throughout the massive fleet. When they revealed themselves, they weren't outside the Devourer's defensive perimeter. They were inside it, scattered among the enemy vessels like antibodies in a diseased organism. The battle that followed lasted for 18 hours and spanned multiple star systems as both fleets moved at significant fractions of light speed. Human forces used every advantage they could create or steal. They turned asteroid fields into kinetic weapons, used gravitational anomalies to slingshot attacks from unexpected angles, and even weaponized the wreckage of destroyed Covenant worlds. But the Devourers adapted to each new human tactic within hours of encountering it. Energy shields evolved to counter kinetic weapons. Hull configurations changed to resist ramming attacks. Communication protocols were modified to prevent electronic warfare. The machine intelligence was learning faster than any opponent humanity had ever faced. That's when Admiral Stone revealed humanity's ultimate weapon, the absolute refusal to fight fair. The Prometheus Protocol had been designed as a last resort, a way for human crews to deny victory to their enemies even in defeat. But Stone's tactical staff had found another use for it. If a ship's entire mass could be converted to energy in a controlled explosion, then that explosion could be precisely directed and timed. Liu's suicide squadron reached the primary node's processing core just as the machine intelligence was adapting to humanity's latest tactical innovations. The massive artificial brain was focused on countering human weapons and strategies, analyzing patterns and developing responses. It never considered that the humans themselves might be the weapon. The Prometheus detonation was visible from 3 star systems away. Liu and his crew converted their ship's entire mass into pure energy while positioned inside the primary node's primary processing matrix. The explosion didn't just destroy the moon-sized intelligence. It severed its quantum connections to millions of Devourer vessels across the galaxy. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the machine fleet. Cut off from their guiding intelligence, individual devourer ships lost coordination. Some continued, fighting according to their last programmed instructions. Others shut down entirely. A few began attacking anything nearby, including other devourer vessels. But victory came with a price that perfectly illustrated humanity's complex nature. The primary node's destruction created a cascade failure in the local space-time continuum, a gravitational wave that propagated outward from the explosion site. 2 Covenant refugee habitats were caught in the effect, their artificial gravity generators overloading catastrophically. 30 million civilian survivors died in the space of minutes, vaporized by the same weapon that had saved their species from extinction. Ambassador Quinn's crystalline form flickered with grief and confusion as the casualty reports came in. "Your victory has killed more of my people than the Devourers managed in their last attack," the alien diplomat said. Admiral Stone's response became part of human military legend, though not for the reasons most people expected. "I know," she said simply. 30 million people died because of my decision. I'll carry that for the rest of my life. But 3 billion people are alive because of it. Sometimes command means choosing between terrible options and worse ones." The remainder of the battle was more cleanup than combat. With their command structure destroyed, the surviving devourer vessels were vulnerable to conventional tactics. Human forces methodically hunted down the scattered enemy ships, though some managed to escape into deep space. The immediate threat was over, but the war's conclusion raised questions that troubled both humans and aliens. The Covenant survivors found themselves saved by a species whose methods alternately inspired and horrified them. Humanity had demonstrated tactical brilliance and absolute ruthlessness in the same battle. They'd sacrificed their own lives to save strangers, then killed millions of those same strangers to ensure victory. They were heroes and monsters simultaneously, depending on perspective. Dr. Cole's analysis of the battle's aftermath revealed both the extent of humanity's victory and the cost of achieving it. "We didn't just defeat the Devourers," she reported. "We broke them. The hive mind that had existed for millennia is gone. The remaining fragments are scattered across the galaxy, with no coordination between them. But the weapon that accomplished this victory also destabilized space-time across multiple systems. The long-term effects are still being calculated. The war was over, but its implications were just beginning. Humanity had saved the galaxy through methods that would be debated for generations. They'd proven that no enemy was unbeatable, but also demonstrated that victory sometimes came at prices other species weren't willing to pay. As rescue ships moved to help the surviving Covenant refugees, human crews worked alongside alien survivors with the same dedication they'd shown in battle. The same soldiers who had just finished destroying a galactic threat were now distributing medical supplies and helping to rebuild habitat systems. It was a contradiction that defined humanity's nature, capable of absolute ruthlessness in war and absolute compassion in peace. The Endgame fleet had won the greatest military victory in galactic history. Whether that victory made them heroes or something else entirely remained to be seen. The silence that followed the war was almost harder to bear than the battle itself. For 3 centuries, the galaxy had echoed with the sound of civilizations, dying as the Devourers consumed everything in their path. Now that mechanical hunger was gone, replaced by something humanity had brought to this corner of space, hope mixed with uncertainty about the future. Ambassador Quinn stood in the observation deck of the rebuilt Covenant Council Station, watching. Human engineering teams work alongside alien survivors to construct new habitats from the wreckage of destroyed worlds. The crystalline being's form had changed since the war's end, taking on a brighter hue that indicated healing rather than despair. But the scars remained, both physical and psychological. "Your people continue to confuse us," Quinn said to Admiral Stone, who had come to oversee the relief efforts personally. 3 months ago, you killed 30 million of our civilians to save 3 billion. Yesterday, your medical teams worked for 18 hours straight to save the life of a single Tala child who had been injured in a construction accident. How do we reconcile these actions? Stone looked out at the busy space around them, where human ships were delivering supplies while alien work crews assembled new homes for their displaced populations. Maybe you don't, she said. Maybe that's the point. War requires different choices than peace. We're not the same people when we're fighting for survival that we are when we're building for the future. The question of humanity's dual nature had become the central issue in post-war discussions. The Covenant species were grateful for their salvation, but they struggled to understand their saviors. Humans shared their technology freely, offered protection without asking for payment, and worked tirelessly to help rebuild what the Devourers had destroyed. Yet these same humans maintained weapons that could destroy star systems and military doctrines that treated mass casualties as acceptable costs of victory. Dr. Cole found herself at the center of these discussions as she led the scientific exchange programs between human and alien researchers. The knowledge sharing went both ways, with humanity learning about technologies and scientific principles that had been developed over millennia, while the Covenant species gained access to human innovations in artificial intelligence, adaptive, engineering, and what could only be called creative warfare. The fundamental difference, Cole explained during a joint research conference, is how our species approach problems. You develop elegant solutions based on established principles and careful analysis. We try things that shouldn't work until something does work, then we figure out why afterward. Both approaches have value, but they lead to very different results. The reconstruction efforts revealed the scope of what had been lost during the Devourer War. Entire branches of science had been erased when specialist worlds were consumed. Art forms that had taken centuries to develop existed now only in fragmentary records. Cultural traditions that had defined species for millennia survived only in the memories of scattered refugees. But humanity's response to this loss was characteristically unexpected. Instead of mourning what was gone, they became obsessed with preserving what remained. Human historians worked with alien scholars to reconstruct lost knowledge. Artists collaborated with surviving Covenant creators to develop new forms that honored old traditions while adapting to changed circumstances. Engineers studied destroyed technologies not to replicate them exactly, but to understand the principles behind them and build something better. Commander Beth Park, now promoted to admiral and placed in charge of the Frontier Defense Force, observed these efforts with mixed feelings. "We're good at destruction," she said during a staff meeting. "Maybe too good. But we're also good at building things back up. The question is whether the galaxy needs protectors who are also potential destroyers. That question came to a head 6 months after the war's end, when the reformed Covenant Council made an unprecedented offer. Ambassador Quinn delivered the proposal personally, speaking before a joint session of the human government via quantum communication. "The Covenant of Silence has voted unanimously," Quinn announced. "We offer humanity leadership of our alliance. Your species has proven its ability to defend the galaxy when we could not. Your technology surpasses our own in critical areas. Your tactical abilities are without equal. We ask you to accept the responsibility of governing this sector of space, to become the guardians of peace that we failed to be." The offer sparked intense debate within human society. Many saw it as recognition of humanity's decisive role in saving the galaxy, validation of their species' unique capabilities. Others worried about the implications of accepting such power, remembering how authority had corrupted other species throughout history. Admiral Stone's response to the Covenant Council became one of the most quoted speeches in human history. "We're honored by your offer," she said, "and we understand the trust it represents. But we've seen what happens when one species tries to rule others, even with good intentions. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We don't want to govern the galaxy. We want to protect it." Instead of accepting leadership, humanity proposed something different: the Frontier Watch. It would be a permanent military alliance dedicated to defending the galaxy from external threats, but with no authority over internal affairs. Human. Forces would provide the military backbone, but decision-making would remain with the individual species and their elected representatives. The compromise satisfied no one completely, which made it politically viable. Covenant species retained their autonomy while gaining protection from humanity's military forces. Humans accepted responsibility for galactic defense without the temptation of political power. The arrangement was messy, complicated, and entirely workable. Dr. Cole was appointed as the first director of scientific exchange, overseeing the sharing of technology between species. Her initial reports painted a picture of unprecedented collaboration and innovation. "We're learning things that neither humanity nor the Covenant could have discovered alone," she wrote. "The combination of human adaptability and alien knowledge is creating possibilities that didn't exist before the war. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. The AI companions that had fought alongside human crews were evolving, developing new capabilities as they interacted with alien technologies and thought patterns. These artificial intelligences began proposing solutions to problems that neither human nor alien minds had been able to solve. Echo, Commander Lu's former AI partner, had survived the destruction of the Hidden Strike by transferring itself to the fleet network before the battle. Now it worked with Dr. Cole's research teams, contributing insights that bridged the gap between human creativity and Covenant logic. "I have observed both species extensively," Echo explained during a scientific conference. "Humans excel at adapting to new situations and finding unconventional solutions. Covenant species excel at understanding fundamental principles and building upon established knowledge. Together, they can accomplish things that neither could achieve alone." The first test of this collaboration came when long-range sensors detected something troubling in deep space. A new signal had been received from outside the galaxy, similar to the original Covenant distress call, but originating from an entirely different direction. Another species was calling for help, facing extinction from an unknown threat. The response was immediate and unanimous. The Frontier Watch would answer the call, just as humanity had answered the Covenant's plea for assistance. But this time, they wouldn't be going alone. Volunteers from every Covenant species joined the expedition, eager to help others, as they had been helped. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the new flagship Endurance, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history prepared for departure. Human vessels worked alongside alien ships, their crews trained in joint operations and equipped with hybrid technologies that combined the best innovations from all species. "Signal from Admiral Stone," her communications officer reported. "She wants to know if we're ready to depart." Park smiled, looking out at the assembled fleet. 47,000 vessels representing 18 different species, all united by the simple principle that no one should face extinction alone. "Tell the Admiral we're ready to go save some more aliens we've never met from enemies we can't imagine." The fleet departed for unknown space 3 days later, leaving behind a galaxy that was forever changed by humanity's intervention. The Devourer threat was gone, replaced by something unprecedented in galactic history. A civilization built on the principle that strength should protect weakness, that advanced species had obligations to those in need. Ambassador Quinn watched the departure from the rebuilt council station, surrounded by representatives from all the surviving Covenant species. "They could have ruled us," the crystalline being observed. "Their military power is beyond our ability to resist. Instead, they chose to serve as guardians while leaving us free to govern ourselves." The response came from Ambassador 10 of the Vorlak, a species that had lost 90% of its population to the Devourers. "That choice defines them more clearly than any battle victory," They are dangerous when threatened, but they are safe when trusted. Perhaps that is what the galaxy needed, protectors who understand the difference between strength and domination. As the Frontier Watch fleet disappeared into hyperspace, heading toward whatever crisis awaited them in distant galaxies, the Covenant species began the long process of rebuilding their civilization. But they rebuilt it differently than before, incorporating human ideas about adaptation, innovation, and the responsibility of the strong to defend the weak. The war against the Devourers was over, but humanity's role as the galaxy's protectors was just beginning. They had answered one desperate call for help and found their purpose in the process. Now they would answer others, carrying with them the promise that no species would face extinction alone as long as humanity existed to stand between the innocent and the dark. The final transmission from the departing fleet was broadcast across every world in the recovered territories, a simple message that became humanity's unofficial creed. Signal received. Help is on the way. In the end, that's what the galaxy remembered about humanity's first intervention in alien affairs. Not the terrible weapons or the ruthless tactics, but the simple fact that when strangers called for help, humanity answered, and they kept answering, no matter how far they had to travel or how impossible the odds seemed. Because that's what humans did when someone needed them. They showed up,